Hey there, I am Bonnie. Thank you for tuning in. Today we will be setting up October in my bullet journal, and this is by far the most maximalist setup that I've ever done. So this is a long one. Grab your pumpkin spice lattes. I have mine right here, and I have gone through a few during the setup, but let's take a look first at how September is going, or was going. I enjoyed this theme very much, but in use more than during the actual setup. However, that is a good thing. And it was Monday when I filmed this. But let's jump right in. We will start, of course, with the cover page, which I will illustrate on a piece of black paper. I will pop the picture that inspired this whole thing on the screen. I saw it, thought it was too complicated to paint. Then I remembered that I'm a pro at drawing on black paper, and it snowballed from there really. The theme is witchcraft or witch castle. I can't call it a witch's theme because I only drew them once at the very end, so it's just a bunch of elements within that scope. But going for spooky realism rather than the trendy cutesy vibes for this one, just because that's my preference. And I was inspired by many pictures. I will try to insert the main ones for each spread on the screen, but it was mainly a concept that I found images that fit to rather than the opposite. Usually an image inspires me and I take the concept of the image and I apply it to the rest of the spreads. This time it was the other way around, if that makes any sense. I will leave my Pinterest board linked down below with all the pictures and materials that I've used. Let's talk more about how I drew the castle. So I started with a gel pen. This one I got locally, but a Jelly Roll size 8 works fine for this. And I went over the sketch that I had, and I wasn't too precious about straight lines or anything because, well, this is a lengthy process as is. This sketch took, well, not the sketch, the illustration in itself took about 2.5 hours maybe, but then also it's not going to be visible in the end. And at this point, to be honest, it doesn't look too good, but trust the process. Then I used a Zebra Sarasa white gel pen from the Milky set, and this is a watery, faint white pen with a very fine nib, so anything of this description works fine. Think Jelly Roll size 5 maybe. This is usually the type of pen that we collectively deem as a bad, low-quality white pen. However, there are certain instances where this is the perfect pen, such as this one. So I always keep it on hand in case I need it for such purposes. I used it to do the details and brick walls and such, as well as the bushes and stairs in front of the castle. And at first I thought I was going to draw each individual brick, but that A, did not look good, and B, was too time consuming. So I just did horizontal and vertical lines. This gives dimension to the sketch because the outline and details are not of the same thickness or definition. Then I used this black brush pen that actually shows up on the black paper. I got this by pure coincidence from a local store, and I don't know what formula this is, but it is clearly distinguishable on the black paper. And if you don't have something of this description, use maybe black gouache paint. Shows beautifully on the black paper. And I used this to do the shadows and to differentiate the castle from the background. And then I also used a near dry Faber Castell brush pen in cool gray, I think 2 shades, to blend the shadows and the details a bit more seamlessly. It added a nice touch, but it's not necessary, and I think it only worked because my pen, the tip itself is roughed and abused, and the ink is almost dry. Then it was time to do the details at the bottom of the illustration, and I was nervous about this. I wasn't sure how to depict the detail from the original image, but I did the basic squiggly lines and bumps, I guess they are, with the thicker pen. Then I used the black brush pen on the areas in between the lines, then went in with the zebra Sarasa gel pen to do the finer details, and I think that captured the detail from the original picture quite well, and I like how it turned out. I was mostly nervous because there are blanker areas, like shrouded in shadows, in between the detailed areas, and I thought that wouldn't look too good, but it did. And I then went ahead and did more detail work on the stairs. After that, I did the tree branches. They are simple enough, and outlined with the gel pen and then filled in with the black brush pen. I started to work on the moon, which I feel like is the star of the show in this illustration, and I had the perfect marker for this, a pale yellow in an acrylic formula. Having this pen is actually what made me attempt this art piece and want to attempt it, because it just fits so perfect. And then to do the rest of the background, which is like the moonlight shining across everything almost, or like shining in the background, I used a detail brush for that, and I just pressed it against the bottom of the nib to get some ink on the brush, because that was the easiest way. I tried to put some ink on a ceramic surface and then pick it up with the brush, but that just did not work. In theory, you could color the entire thing in the pale yellow and then add back the black details with a pen or marker, but in my experience that doesn't look so good, because the black will just lay on top of the acrylic paint and it will not sink into it, so it's not gonna look seamless. And I wanted a more seamless blend, so I did it this way. There are some outer buildings, or maybe the village, that are in the distance, and I wasn't sure how to do them. It was a lot of trial and error. I first used the gel pen and smudged it down, then I colored them fully with the white gel pen, then used a Faber Castell cool gray to dull it down, then I colored it fully with a black brush pen, but I didn't like how shiny it looked next to everything else, so I went over it with a black coloring pencil, but I just kept adding and blending till I liked how it looked. Then all I had to do is glue it down on the page, and this is it. I didn't add an October header because I didn't know where to put it. I ended up lettering October vertically on the right side of the illustration with the purple glitter, but you can only see it in the intro clip. Moving on to the calendar spread, although simple in concept, this took even more time than the cover page, more than 2.5 hours, I think. And I will start with the background, which is wood panel walls, and flooring, which is also wood panel. But for the walls, I worked with the paper this time, so because I'm using gray paper, I didn't need to add a base color and went directly into detailing the wood pattern with a fine brush and a watery gray. I used a scrap piece of paper to test the color, and from there it was lines, wonky, uneven lines with the occasional bumps and knots. And I think the key here is to do a lot of fine lines on each wood panel instead of a few widely spaced lines. And in the end, it will look good regardless, so don't focus too much on each stroke or on ensuring that every line is straight, even, and of the same darkness. I went about the floor in a similar way, except that I added a base color because I wanted to differentiate it from the walls. This caused the paper to warp a bit while I was working on it, but it went away within a day, and now it's flat as a pancake. And between each floor panel and on the walls too, I added a darker gray to accentuate the paneling so it does not look like one piece of wood. Oh, and for the paints, I mixed these for the illustration that I did on the very last page, which I did a day before. So I had the paints mixed and I decided to just continue using them. So it is a very pale yellow ochre with gray or like black mixed in. So it is a warm gray is what I'm trying to say. The showstar of this spread is the fireplace and brick wall. I love how the brick wall turned out, and this is my redemption. Again, I keep on coming back to this, but I did bricks in May and I do not like how those looked, so having this turn out so well redeems it a bit. And I used a watered down gray to color each brick imprecisely. If you look at the pattern, each brick has like a swoosh of shadow at the bottom, so that is what I was trying to do. So I did that and then went over it with a clean wet brush to blend it further. And when you use a clean wet brush, I do recommend using a larger brush. In my experience, that works better. And the secret here for the fireplace to look so good is to not use fine liner at all. I did not use a single fine liner in all of these spreads. Then I used less water to get a darker gray and went around the bricks and the spaces in between them, essentially trying to imitate the look of mortar that is usually used between the bricks to glue them together. This really brought it all together, and at the very end I went with an even darker gray only on the outer edges where the brick meets the wood walls, and blended it afterwards. For the fireplace itself, I also went with a much darker gray since it was also wood and I didn't want it to blend with the walls. In the inspo image, there was some details to the wood, so I imitated that slightly. I wasn't going to, hence why I didn't sketch it, but I thought that was another good way to differentiate it from the rest of the wood elements because there's many of them on this page. And for the inner walls of the fireplace, I just added lines to show the panels, then added shadows on the top panel, so gray, and then a very watered down white to add the light caused by the fire, which I ended up making white. I added a bit of stone under the cauldron, and as I mentioned, decided to make the fire white. I also added color to the bottom of the inner side of the fireplace, but not entirely touching the stones under the cauldron, because I thought about it, and if the fire is shining a light to the inner walls, it will also shine a light on the ground. So I did it that way, and then I did the hearth, or like the wood at the bottom in front of the, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. I'm doing it right here, and I did that the darkest because I wanted it to stand out from the floor, since the floor has also a darker color of gray. For the cauldron itself, I used progressively darker grays rather than pure black straight on. I thought that gave it more dimension, and I did that a couple of times throughout this theme. Then I used a dark purple shimmer watercolor for the wisps of smoke emitting from the cauldron. I used the same purple for the headers of the days of the week later. And then afterwards, I decided to add some white shimmer to add a glimmer to the fire. To add the actual calendar, you see me disassemble the notebook to add the paper calendar elements which I've prepared beforehand. I decided to have all of my writable areas be on black paper, but I wanted them to look as if they were a part of the notebook and not just glued in, at least on this page and on the weeklies. That is the look that I was going for. So I used a sketchbook and took some papers out without ripping them, so kept the spiral edge intact, and took apart this notebook to insert them where they are supposed to be. And again, did the weeklies while I'm at it. I knocked my camera to the side by accident, but you can still see what I'm doing, sort of. And then I just reassembled the notebook. I have done this many times, so I'm used to it, and it was not so confusing. For the headers, I used this beautiful vintage bold font. I'm really glad I found this font. It was actually what motivated me to continue the setup, because at some point I was feeling let down with the skeleton of the setup, and I was so close to just scrapping the whole idea and journaling the information I need on blank pages, because I just did not have the motivation to continue. But again, finding this font motivated me to finish, and I'm really happy that I did. This is perhaps my favorite theme of all times. Lastly, to wrap this spread and finish it off, I added this month header element above the fireplace. I like how it looked. I feel like I needed to add this month's header onto the page somehow, and this was a good way to do so. And then I added shadows under it, and that made it look as though it is truly hanged above the fireplace and not just glued there, which I really like. Next, we have my dashboard, and this page has gone through a couple of phases, but the one that I settled on is relatively simpler than the previous ones. I wanted to add a chandelier element and also some decoration on the floor, like tables and candles and such. So I did that, and this was inspired by multiple inspo images, such as the ones on the screen. I started with the chandelier. I thought this was going to be a more complicated process, but all I did is go with a light gray for the base shade almost everywhere, then a darker shade for the shadows, and white for the highlights and the candle flames. Everything was done loosely, and not too imprecise, but it turned out so well. I usually have 4 sections in my dashboard, and I decided to put 2 on each page. And since I have hanging decoration on the left page, I decided to make stands almost for the 2 sections on that page. I'm not sure what to call the element exactly, but it was inspired by the decoration that I have on the right page down at the bottom. And again, since I had decoration down at the bottom on the floor on the right page, I decided to make some ornamental hangers and have my sections dangling down, and I thought that balanced it out quite nicely. I used scrap pieces of black paper for each section, and this time I glued them down. I lettered my headers using the same font in all capitals in the white gel pen. As I said, to balance everything out, I decided for the other page to have 2 ornamental vintage metal hangers of sorts, so that 2 elements are up on the ground and 2 are dangling from the ceiling, if that makes sense. But yes, I went about it in a similar manner, adding a base layer, then a shadow, then a highlight to give it a metallic look. I'm not sure if it has a metallic look, but it has a nice look. For the decoration on the right page, I have mini tables, I guess, with skulls covered under a glass dome. One of the skulls is exposed with a spider crawling on it and a bunch of candles surrounding the tables. Unfortunately, I lost some footage here also, but I used the same paint mixes for all of the skulls, doing a more opaque layer of the pale yellow almost, and I added a bit of gray just so that it is not too yellow. And then I mixed some yellow ochre with the gray to get a brownish shade for the details on the skulls. Although don't take a closer look because they look horrendous. From afar they look fine, and only because of the glass globes, but close up they are atrocious. I have done an atrocious job with this one, but oh well, the exposed one looks fine enough. For the domes, I gave them a wash of very watered down white, and then went in with a polychromos Faber Castell coloring pencil to add some lines to imitate the glass texture or reflection almost. And I wanted a few candles around the tables, so I sketched them in and kept the sketch as is for the details, and colored them in with a pale warm gray and some white for the flames. And originally I had a line to divide the wall and the floor, but I didn't have the energy to do wood floors and wood walls, so I erased it. Later on I added it back in and smudged some gray across. You will see it in the flip through, and it doesn't look too good in my opinion, and at some point I will go back and fix it, but for now it's good enough. Getting to my weeklies spread, this is very elaborate. you saw me insert the pages for the actual weeklies back when I disassembled and reassembled my notebook, but basically I cut the pages in the size that I needed to fit under the shelf, and then I burnt the edges, and I did that off camera because I didn't want to light a candle under my phone and then deal with the smoke on my desk and all of the ashes. I did that by the sink. I thought this would look very cool, and originally I had another reason why I did this, but the plan changed and it was no longer relevant. But I decided to keep the effect going throughout the theme because I wasn't really repeating any illustrations or elements here, because I'm doing a lot of things that relate to the general theme. So using the burnt edges, the fancy font, and the black paper, as well as the same paint mixes, gave it a more cohesive look, because I was worried about it looking disjointed, but it did not, and I'm really happy about that. Anyway, while I babbled, I did a few frames very loosely with varying shades of gray and went back and forth on working on the pictures in them, but the big ornamental one has a raven, and for that I captured the texture by doing multiple layers of gray, as I did with the cauldron, rather than going straight with the black paint. We also have a full moon, a moth down in the circular frame, fire flames because why not, and a random mushroom also, and a snake skeleton in the vertical frame. Oh, and a horizontal frame at the top with cat eyes, and I ended up doing the eyes with purple shimmer, and that was perfection. It glints in the light like an evil cat would, and I love it. In hindsight, bigger frames would have gone better, but oh well. I loosely textured the shelf as I've done with other wooden elements, and on it we have candles, a couple of potion bottles, a chest with scrolls, although it is not depicted well here by me, a vase with dried sprigs, some crystal clusters, another glass dome with mushrooms under it. I'm thinking enchanted mushrooms, but it doesn't really look that way. And then a fortune bowl, which I colored with black shimmer, and that looks cool also. And most importantly, a stack of books with a witch hat on top. We also have a magic wand hanging on the wall, an animal skull, I forgot which animal this is, a wooden clock because I needed to fill the space and this was the perfect shape, and of course a hanging broom. The broom is another one of my favorite features on this page, along with the witch hat and the cat eyes. For the witch hat, again, I did layers of gray and then shimmer purple for the buckles, and I really like how it looked. I like the wrinkly, imperfect look that I captured here. I don't think I mentioned it, but the little booklet that I made with the black pages is supposed to resemble the witch's spell book, the main one at least, and I wanted to make a desk that also has the shelf and the frames in its view, but I wasn't really sure how to proportion that on the page, and it wouldn't make sense to be able to see the spellbook opened flat while also seeing the shelf and the frames in such a front view. So I ended up not doing that. So yeah, and I did not talk a lot about the painting or coloring process because it is very loose. Using watercolor would be great for this. I'm just more comfortable using gouache. I can control it better and get very faint or very opaque finishes using the same paints. So yeah. And I wanted to add a little bit of purple, so I did that with the couple of potion bottles, the buckle of the witch hat, and the cat eyes. I contemplated doing shimmer green for the cat eyes, but I didn't want to introduce another color because I wanted to keep this very gray. I used the same font and white gel pen to create the weeklies, so each 2 pages create a spread, and each page is going to be sectioned into 4 for each day of the week, plus a notes section. I only made 1 on camera because it is a repetitive process and I was getting really tired at this point, so the rest I will do later. And off camera, a day later, I added black paper before and after the paper inserts, so glued them on the notebook itself for some extra journaling areas. You will see it in the flip through. Lastly, we have my October review. I debated long and hard about this page and how to lay it out, but I ended up doing something really simple and I am really glad I did. So I burnt the edges of a large piece of black paper and laid out my sections in a way that fits, this time using lowercase letters, and I did that with the white gel pen. We have highlights, challenges, accomplished to get to, finances, goals, progress, book stats, and favorite outfits. Wait, I did not put a section in my dashboard to record the books read and outfits worn so that I can summarize them in the review. I forgot about that. Well, good thing is the page that I glued at the end of the weeklies, I will do that into the tracker. I also lost some footage here. Can you tell that I've had a lot of technical difficulties with this one? Anyway, on the next spread, there is another painting. This is the one that I mentioned before that I did a day before the setup and mixed the paints for, and then ended up using them all throughout. I was really inspired to paint this, like just something in me wanted to paint it. So I decided to go for it. And you know, the cover page was a front view of the witch castle. This end page is the witches looking at the castle. I thought it was very symbolic. Is that correctly used? I am not sure, but anyway. It turned out really good, if I do say so myself, and there's definitely room for improvement, but I just love it. I'm really glad that I was able to actually illustrate something like this, and I did another fancy frame. It just felt necessary here. Something was missing though, so I added "Let's get wicked" below it in purple. It is the quote that is on my cauldron mug, and I felt it was appropriate to put it here since the mug kinda led to all of this. You know, I saw the illustration of the castle, then I purchased this mug, and then I was like, okay, now I need to be committed. And committed I was. Finally, we have reached the flip through portion of this video. I did not think we would get here with how long the video has been. Anyway, I've added cobweb details to each spread afterwards and did some minor adjustments, but this is my October setup. I hope you like it as much as I do. I truly love it, and I would love to know what you have done for your October setup, so leave a comment down below and add a witchy emoji if you got till the end. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next one.